Greg Glassman is Chris Cooper's guest on this edition of Run a Profitable Gym. Please hit subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Now, here's Chris with Greg.
So, of course, we've already started chatting, and I've asked Greg, how do you teach nutrition to a 6-year-old? So go. Sorry to interrupt, Greg. Go ahead.
No. I mean, pal, we talk about the sugar bug and the sugar monster, and we're all about the vilification of sugar here.
Okay.
And I got my kids thinking that it is causal of obesity, heart disease, and cancer. Yeah, and cancer. You know,
I get that.
The evidence for that is intriguing, and the likelihood of it seems exceedingly high to me. But what I find really fascinating is I'm off your question here, but I'm going to go here.
Okay.
I'm telling you that we scare our kids with sugar, want them to understand, so they've heard it before. But if you put sugar and cancer into Google, you get a huge in return, a lot of it institutional, and a lot of it using the same language to talk about the importance of debunking the myth that sugar causes cancer. So I go downstairs and immediately ask Maggie, Maggie, have you ever heard that sugar causes cancer? She goes, only from you. And I go, yeah, I would. If you think if something were to be a myth, there'd be someone other than me that is willing to publicly say it. And I say it with no certainty. I say it without profound conviction. What I say is that I will be surprised if that doesn't turn out the case. What I'm saying is that the evidence, especially once you come to realize, as I do, that cancer is a metabolic disease, you start looking for things different as a metabolic disease than you might were a genetic disease. Mm-hmm. Less concerned about radon and more about disruptive forces to the mitochondria, right?
Yeah.
And once you go there, the next thing you kind of notice is this enormous effort to debunk this myth, and it's the myth that no one stated or believed. And I understand what's at play here. And and it also helps me understand why it is that there's resistance to cancer being a metabolic disease, when I think that the nuclear transferase experiments demonstrate quite convincingly that that's exactly what it is. And I'll invite people to go ahead and look those up on your own. It's a little project. But the resistance is that once cancer is a metabolic disease, we're going to start paying closer attention to the things that are disruptive to mitochondria. And we do know one significant way to kick the shit out of your mitochondria, and that is through the oxidative stress of sugar.
But do you think there's resistance
of all body systems, including in the mitochondria?
Do you think there's larger resistance, though, than just like what's in the literature? Like, is there resistance from the story that we're told, obviously, through marketing, but also like resistance from what we want to believe? Like, I don't want to believe that sugar is the cause of cancer. Sugar's good, tastes good, Is there resistance from a bunch of different places, or is it just in kind of the official literature?
The problem is as multifaceted as I could possibly imagine. I don't really know where to start.
Okay.
There's the facet of corruption in the sense of food and beverage industry's influence on academic research and published literature. There's another issue in that there's an epistemic, philosophical failing in academic science, that it's drifted with its null hypothesis significance testing and p-values away from science where validation comes from the predictive strength of models. So it's gone from physical prediction to an inference scheme that is just as fallacious as anything could ever be. And that break in philosophy of science, inspired by Ronald Fisher in the inference world, the whole p-value mess, in large part, and the peer review combination as a replacement for predictive strength is a particularly easy thing to hijack. And so there's people sitting around going, wait a minute, all I need is a big name panel of researchers, and we need p-values that show that the null hypothesis is unlikely, and we can demonstrate that sugar-sweetened beverages have no ill impact. Let's get busy at that, and that's exactly what happens. It's exactly what happens. What's, I think, important from the CrossFit perspective, if we can go there for a second.
Yeah.
I saw recently that, and I never look at, someone sent it to me, but CrossFit was publishing that science shows that exercise can offset debilitation, I think it was, or something to that effect. And of course it does. And I would hope that some science showed it, but it also wouldn't surprise me in the least if it weren't baked full of problems, as almost all science is in this space. But more importantly, the CrossFit affiliates, CrossFit trainers aren't sitting around waiting for science to demonstrate that CrossFit offsets debilitation. This is a clinical reality. And you don't have to have done this long at all to have countless examples of that. In fact, here's my assumption was, if I can reverse it, if you come in here moving poorly and now you're doing handstands and jogging 2 years later, then for sure the same stimulus is going to be responsible in prevention. Mm-hmm. If I can reverse, I'm sure I can prevent. And this becomes a matter of clinical reality, which is nothing but a variant of an empirical fact. And your obligation is to start with the empirical realities, and from there develop useful science. And useful science isn't that what you're seeing is, yep, you're seeing it. We asked my dad to demonstrate that that scientifically that ISR was saving lives. And the challenge there is immense, because the only people that go are those that are willing to stand there 6 days a week for 6 weeks and watch their kids get waterboarded. And so it's people that are terrified of drowning anyways, right? I got to find the same kind of parental concern and then have them do a different program, what unbeknownst to them. I mean, you couldn't even imagine the experiment where you worked it out. And he says that he wondered what our sense of what science is. And what do you mean? And he goes, well, I think you want me to demonstrate that floating babies are better than sinking ones. And he goes, I don't know if that's the kind of thing science does. And I thought that was rich.
Yeah, that's great. So for the listeners who aren't familiar, ISR is Infant Swim Resource, and you can look it up online. But Greg, I said earlier that, your genius is making the complex simple. And it seems like MetFix might be the next evolution of this. And would you think of MetFix as kind of an evolution that kind of comes after the Broken Science Initiative, or is it on top, or is it the practical component of Broken Science, or how does this all fit?
In 2019, January 1st of 2019, there was a coup. And that is the guy that first built the website and his inner circle took back control of .com from games and frivolity. I knew it, Danny Bowflex and constant games coverage, that what I thought was exciting and powerful about CrossFit was turning into something else, and rapidly. And so we built a lot, even the workouts. And so from the ground up, we revamped. And that morning, January 1st of 2019, we had the family in the living room. And what had happened over the past several years is that I would go to the games or any event and stand there in a long receiving line, and I'd see, oh, there's Chris Cooper coming up eventually, and the Chris Coopers would always explain to me that it wasn't about the games at their box, as if I didn't fucking know, and it bugged the hell out of me. And so I'd see here, I'm going to have to hear it. And they'd tell me that it's different in my box, man. It's not about the games. And so that's why we had Whistler. I said, I got to get in front of the 10-year affiliates and tell them. I also knew that the challenge was, first off, the miracle that is CrossFit is the non-protected secret that you left with after the seminar. And I tell you, at the seminar, there's nothing that happens at the seminar that a reasonably bright 10-year-old couldn't have pulled from the internet this morning, from our website. But here we go. What's not on this website is that your squats aren't below parallel, though they feel like they are, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you clean. That's not how you clean. So that kind of stuff is the part that can't get looked up. But I knew that the miracle of CrossFit was in the hands of the affiliates, and that the mothership needed to find relevancy.
Yeah.
And after, it didn't take much soul searching at all, and I realized what that was. And it looked like all those things that I can't do myself. And so I wouldn't have looked to the mothership for insights on bathroom cleaning, nor training protocol. But there were things like protecting me from deadly legislation and litigation, and continued education and validation of the methods to provide material and resource to the affiliate. These are the things that I would have counted on, looked for, and wanted to receive. And so we did things like stop the licensure, occupational licensure, formed the risk retention group. The mothership spent $1 million to avoid a $10,000 settlement in a case in Texas. $1 million to avoid $10,000, and a year and a half. And we finally got that zero verdict. But we wouldn't settle him because of what I didn't want to do is settle 50,000 times 15,000. Right. 10,000 times 15,000. Wasn't willing to do it. And it set a precedent. The Zoe Harcombs and Malcolm Kendricks and Asim Malhotras and Tim Noakes, and I don't even want to leave anyone out. They're all just so amazing people. Ivor Cummins, we're talking to him again. All those people from that 2019 point forward were more likely to be seen on the front end than was
the games
winners. Just trying to think of his name, and he hates me because I don't remember him. We tried to sell the games, and everyone in the world was interested. Every kind of VC, they had them lined up, taking me out to dinner. And what I couldn't do is I couldn't get anyone to buy the games. They wanted training and certification, affiliation, and a certification. And there was no hiding the fact that the games was an enormous cost with a dubious return. It wasn't the business. It was a tumor on the business. And that's a thing that the people in games media and the games competitors themselves never fully grokked. And so Joe Rogan says to Frazier, that's his name, that he doesn't know your name even after he's made you rich. I'm like, no, he didn't make me rich. I'd have to spend $25 million to get 23 back so that Frazier could make 2.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no business there. So what's happened? The question on MetFix. As an owner, I was able to move CrossFit in that direction. And what I wanted was, I said, we don't presume to know the NSCA, the ACSM, the NIH, nor the CDC's charters. But we could sit here and come up with something that I'm sure would be close to what they would put on paper. And that would be something with integrity and honesty, objectively give advice and guidance for health, right? All that, it sounds great, right?
Yeah.
Whatever we imagine it to be, I think we would all agree that it, and the FDA, that it is in wholesale fucking abdication of that charter. At this point, if you're trusting the CDC, I find that actually humorous. And maybe things are going to change rapidly there. Believe it or not, I got friends in the house. It's kind of funny that we would end up at a point like this, but the management changes include people that I've been very friendly with. Now,
interesting.
Now I could run CrossFit and make it about the things it was about. I don't know what a game plan would look like that could stay true to that and be fiduciarily responsible to investors. I don't think there's a VC portfolio that wants a guy saying sugar is causing heart disease. I don't think there's anything in the rest of your holdings that goes, oh, that helps.
Or we're not going to settle with the SCA. Yeah.
Right. And so that I understand that the nutrition program that comes out will be obligatorily defective. I sent Russ and Russ to Exercises Medicine's fitness certification. And at the end, Russ shoots his hand up. It's weird. We've sat here for 2 days and listened to all of this. Not one word on nutrition. And they go, aha, great point. And that's because it's outside of your ken, outside of your area of expertise. And we have things for this like the USDA, the food pyramid, and an ethical trainer, an honest trainer, a good trainer uses that material and that material only. And you find right there exactly why exercise is medicine. They need a coterie of trainers that will refuse to tell the truth about sugar. That's important. And any venture capital holding isn't going to be, there's no publicly traded, there's no portfolio in a venture capital's holdings that wants the problems that we would bring and are bringing to that game. And no one's going to fix chronic disease and not come clean on sugar. We're not going to come clean on sugar. They're not going to fix chronic disease. And so me individually, MetFix, we're not looking for institutional reform. Is it needed? Sure. Would I like to see it? Yes. I went up and down the halls of Congress with Nina Teichholz and others going to change USDA. If only we'd get in the Science, Health, and Technology Committee. If only we could talk to the DC legislators. We talked to everybody. I finally had someone from the New York delegation that I got into a pretty nasty little confrontation with. He finally stopped. Great guy with a Southern accent and a funky kind of charm to him. Headed the New York delegation. He says, oh, wow, man. He goes, I got a true believer here. And I go, yeah, whatever. He goes, no, seriously. He goes, I'll go 10 years without seeing someone doesn't have some bullshit up their sleeve. He goes, I get what you're saying now. I get it. And I apologize. Tone instantly changes. Couldn't believe that. True believer. He goes, do you understand that Pepsi Cola is headquartered in Purchase, New York? And he goes, and the name makes you giggle? Well, it's exactly right. And he goes, and every one of us, every state is either beholden red or blue to Coke or Pepsi, and you're coming in here talking anti-sugar, dude, and there's nobody's going to help you. You will have no friends in elected officials. Wow. Not going to happen. And I'm sitting there with Podesta's people, and we're all looking at each other like, that was well put. The one thing Coke and Pepsi can agree on, and they had control every fucking state, the one thing they can agree on is that these anti-sugar guys are lunatics.
Wow.
And they're not. They're not. So MetFix can go there. CrossFit can't. MetFix will stay close with RFK Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya. CrossFit ain't going to do that.
Got it.
No one wants their investment taken where I would take it.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Does that create
It
any kind of
includes pharma too. I mean, you can start on that. I think the vaccine was so much worse than the disease that it's like and that's still, there's still a divide there that is treacherous.
Does that create any kind of friction? I mean, Emily said the first 100 MetFix affiliates are by and large also CrossFit affiliates. Does that create any kind of friction between the CrossFit affiliate and the MetFix affiliate then?
I sure hope not. In fact, my vote was, but Emily's running this thing, and someone asked me, one of our friends from France asked me if I wanted to be the guy that comes out on the balcony and waves. And I said, yeah, kinda. I mean, truthfully, yes. Do I want to travel? Not so much. But I'll tell you what I really don't want to do. I don't want to teach the fucking push press. And I don't want to take questions about programming. And I didn't enjoy teaching nutrition. I don't want to do that now, but I'm ready for torches and spear forks on the sugar front. I think seed oils are bad. I don't want to put any energy there because we can't do GMOs, seed oil, pesticide, vaccine, and sugar. Right?
Yeah.
And if it were I sugar, and I know they do, I would fund a broad range of concerns so that compromise keeps me from suffering.
Right. Okay.
And it would. I see that all the time. When I hear someone talking about chronic disease, and they've gone on for 3-4 minutes now, and I'm hearing seed oils and pesticides and genetically modified organisms and microplastics, I'm like, oh, that's the enemy. That's the enemy. I can't assess the significance of seed oil damage, and I know it to be real. It's got to be real. I'm confident of that. I cannot assess the totality of it in a hyperinsulinemic, glycemic state, and 100 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
Such simple mechanisms like with a chronically elevated blood sugar, sodium retention is a problem. Too much. When at euglycemia, sodium retention is a problem. Holding on to it. Right? Completely different reaction. And everything seems that way to me. The hormonal disruption that chronically elevated blood sugar provides, that insulin glucagon disruption is so primal to so much functionality in every mammalian system from the first proto-shrew 1 billion years ago to today. We share that hormonal axis. To jigger it the way we do, there won't come something that surprises me as a consequence of that. Not mental illness, not thermoregulation, not please, everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And we can explain it so many different ways too. My personal favorite is glycation. That's that covalently bonding of sugar to essential structures, typically protein, sometimes fat. And where we see that in disease states, everywhere we look. Everywhere we look. Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. There's a glycation component.
So if MetFix affiliates can't rely on obviously government support or help, and basically they're trying to convince or find the people who are already self-advocates for their own health, where do they start making, penetrating their community and getting people in to actually take proactive steps in their health? Perhaps
my thoughts are in terms of a practitioner without really, could a hospital be a MetFix affiliate? I would sure hope so. A children's hospital, especially. I was part of an effort to pull all soda out of some children's hospitals, and it was a fight. You had to. It was tough. It happened from the vending machines within the staff areas, commissary, patients, everything. Nobody liked that. Could a school be a MetFix affiliate? Physicians, yes, I think great. But a CrossFit affiliate, I think, is what a lot of people are picturing. And I think for me, it would be this, that I'm selling the docency to your metabolic recovery. That's what you're paying for. And I'm going to give you some fitness too. But I would turn the conversation and the focus to what we did when we had the experiment in the basement with the underserved people at HQ, where I wanted people that were particularly challenged metabolically so that I could demonstrate to employees of CrossFit Inc. But they'd have to go through the parking lot and come up through the gym to go into the building. And I wanted them to see what I was going to do with the last people you would ever imagine in a fitness commercial. And the way we came across that is I just straight out from the start said, I want fat fucks and old farts, and they can't be fat enough or old enough. And the challenge immediately was how to put that out into space. And I came up with the formulation of put out on Facebook, if you're the last person you would ever imagine doing CrossFit, we want to talk to you. And out of that response, which was considerable, I founded a coterie of people that were in having serious troubles, 450-pound charge nurse with a walker, right?
Wow.
And her dad, he doesn't even have a heart. He's got a medic ID bracelet that says that he's got an Archimedes screw for a heart. There is no pulse. I'm not dead.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's a father-daughter team. And we started with 12 people, and a year later we had 150. And the stories were why I train. That's it. That is it. There's purpose in that it transcends anything that can be put on a dais, on a podium.
Yeah.
There's no amount of medals around the neck. There's nothing like what we were doing in there. New ownership dismantled that program and took down Forging Elite Fitness from the walls before they wanted cameras in there to shoot the new open. They didn't want those people in there.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I said, you know what? I told Dave and Savannah, I'm going to put a 400-pound woman on the front end of the site. Jeff Kane didn't like it either. Nobody liked it. Nobody liked that. Nobody thought that was good for business.
Wow.
Who was I speaking to? Was I trying to lure in 400 people? Nope. What I was talking to is the 15,000 people that have the greatest opportunity for advancing the health, preventing chronic disease that exists in the community. Mm-hmm. And you can extend that leadership to the physicians that come to your box, and so many affiliates have. It's amazing how many physicians learn something profound about metabolism and disease prevention and reversal in a box. I know of a case, famous one here in Phoenix, where grossly overweight internal medicine doc crosses the street to go to the gym. He doesn't know CrossFit from his asshole, but his practice sits where he can see the gym. Mm-hmm. He loses an enormous amount of weight, questions the diet and the exercise and all of it, finally reports to them that he was a type 2 diabetic and now he's not. And the whole thing is a revelation to him, professionally and otherwise. So what do? They put "We cure type 2 diabetes" up on a marquee. And I'm like, any day now, someone's going to knock on the door and drag those fuckers off for that.
Yeah.
And we backed him. I told him, I'll pay for whatever comes down the pike for that legally. And let it be known to everything in the state of Arizona that you want to have a fight, you're gonna have to show that they didn't do it, that they can't, and that they know it. And I don't think you can do that. And so they remained unmolested. But what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing. The current, I can't play that game with a fiduciary responsibility to an investor that wants to maximize profit. I also can't argue against CrossFit, dumbbells, jump ropes, and fish oil.
Right.
If on assumption of the fiduciary obligation to the dude that hired me, right?
Right.
I would do that. I mean, but see, I don't know how I could run that thing. I mean, I know the things like those are things we turned down. I didn't want to do jump ropes. I didn't want to do fish oil. We asked the people at Nordic Natural, what would be better about this fish oil? And they go, be branded CrossFit. And I'm like, what else? Well, nothing else. You'd make money.
That's funny.
And that seemed delusional of the brand. You know, on that first sale from the guys from what was that thing called? Whatever. But they testified in my divorce as to my mismanagement of the company by evidence of the things I was leaving on the table.
Was this Anthos?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Allowing the affiliates to make their own T-shirts was me mismanaging the marital asset. And you could bring one MBA in after another to tell you that was a stupid thing to do, to let them make their own shirts.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't get it. They're tribes. They're independently owned and operated. You can open your doors. You can be John Wellborn and have a CrossFit Newport Beach, and the motto was "Go fuck yourself." And you'd see those in the grocery store, beautiful women wearing the "Go fuck yourself" John Wellborn T-shirt, and then 3 years later meet a religious gal and get tossed out of the gym for saying "goddamn." That's okay. I mean, it takes all types, right?
It does, yeah. Yeah, I see that. How important is media, do you think, to the new era, I guess, of MetFix? I mean, that was maybe the first thing I ever learned from you in person, was that just how valuable media was to the whole movement.
Yeah. We were having at CrossFit years and years ago meetings with bit delivery experts telling us that you get this rapid growth with the giveaway, but at I don't know what it was, 15 to 20 terabytes, the whole thing goes bad on you, goes south on you, and you lose. You can't maintain scale, and everyone goes broke. And I should stay away from the numbers, but it was funny that we were already at like 50 to 100x that in bike delivery. Western Digital gave us a drive that actually required several $100,000 in building and air conditioning to keep it cold, because we had many times the Library of Congress's holding in largely red camera footage of the games.
Yep.
And so of course, it was in many ways a media company. I'd Google myself, and turns out I'm a publisher, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we had the best selling documentaries on iTunes for several years. And so media is all important, but I don't see a value beyond being source and repository for reliable information for people of a like mind. And I want that mantle. I want the mantle that the CDC and the FDA abandoned. It may be an underwriter's laboratory of, if you will, of health information, where they may not be right, but they're not lying, right?
Yeah.
And with that spirit alone, you're gonna be useful as a resource, I would suspect. And so I want to collect those things in those people. When you know something, and here's that thing we know, here's what's important. If you take the universally accepted parameterization of health, and what I'm talking about is blood pressure, vitals, bone density, muscle mass, triglycerides, cholesterol, you go on and on, a lot of them. You look at those things And if you treat them as though they were independent variables and attempt to derive a healthy state by bringing the blood pressure down, we're going to bring the triglycerides down. And we're going to increase your bone density. And I do this by chemopharmaceutical intervention along those parameters, instead of the scientifically and essential, logical, truthful realization that all of those things are dependent variables of lifestyle choices. What you end up doing is you're hammering on the speedometer of a runaway train. I'm not going to suppress your triglycerides with drugs, elevate your bone density with drugs, reduce your blood pressure with drugs, and have a healthy organism.
Got it.
What I can do potentially is extend your lifespan in that debilitated state. So that sustainability, right? The big fuzzy word that so many love. Sustainability in this space gets us to that on a broad retinue of drugs at 50 years old and living to be 125 on that, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that should be the goal. It's a horrible thing. The unprecedented amount of death we had during COVID was a tragedy amongst the chronically ill, amongst the worst sufferers of metabolic syndrome. And it ripped through those. The message from the worst of Italy, from the physicians there, was not mask up. It wasn't get vaccine. It was stay fit, from the ones working the front line.
That's interesting. And I heard
stay fit.
I heard something really similar in Sweden too. But you really didn't hear that in North America at all. Is it up to the MetFix affiliates to bridge these gaps with their local physicians to create their own media? I mean, one thing that I think you famously said is that if you talk to the smart kids, they'll explain it to everybody else or something like that. Like, is that what the first 100 MetFix affiliates are really going to do?
Yeah, I don't know what the motivation is entirely in limiting to 100, and I don't have clear sense, maybe entirely of what an affiliate does or doesn't do.
Okay.
But I do know this, that when you understand something as important as the fact that the health parameterization, it consists of dependent variables controlled by lifestyle choices, chiefly sugar intake and sedentarism, the ravages of those two, and that they're both one looks certainly, the other for sure looks like addictive behaviors. At the point that you understand that, and that there's no market for that, there's no marketplace for that, there's no medical organizations like that, what you need to do is hub and network and bring people around. And how interesting is it that I'll be bringing around the same people again, the Tim Noakes, the Zoe Harcombs, the Ivor Cummings, the Malcolm Kendricks, Asim Malhotra, and now we got Jay Bhattacharya and RFK Jr. And I think that there needs to be, and so I think that what's available on the resource and the greater conversation and networking, I think we're going to start a book club around stove. I can simultaneously start educating as to what science is and what science isn't. I mean, look how simple this is to teach people that science, teach our children that science is source and repository of man's objective knowledge, right? Source and repository. It's where we keep it and where it comes from. And that this knowledge silos in models And these models are a forecast of a measurement. They take a measurement and a set of conditions and predict a future measurement, and the validation of the model comes from its predictive strength. I mean, these are indeed things you can teach children, and that the predictive strength is the sole determinant of validation, and then that's independent of everything else, so that rather the scientific idea with its predictive strength comes through inspiration or perspiration, that doesn't affect its validity. I had somewhere between an acquaintance and friend. He called me before him, and I enjoyed his company, and we got together several times. But he got a Nobel Prize in chemistry because of an idea he had high on LSD, mixing batter in a commercial bakery. And that was for PCR. And they didn't get to say, you don't get the Nobel Prize for PCR because you were high on LSD and stirring batter in a commercial mixer. It doesn't work that way, right?
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend anyone take LSD and stir batter in a commercial mixer and think you're going to get a Nobel Prize from it. But the significant point is that the validation of scientific models comes out of their predictive strength, and that has nothing to do with peer review. And it also has nothing to do with the probability of the data on assuming a null, to get right at the null hypothesis significance testing, which is something we could do show on after show. But there are people in that space like Gerd Gigerenzer at Max Planck that I couldn't get enough of. Recommend anyone to read Gerd Gigerenzer. Every 10 to 12 years, he writes something brilliant on the failures of p-values and null hypothesis significance testing, and the brilliance and the extent of the realization and support for that it should be enough to put an end to it, and it's not. It's not going to go away.
Well, you're homeschooling, I think you said 5 of your kids right now, and you're using a math textbook from the 19th century. How are you teaching your own kids about science?
I'm going to make an attempt to bridge qualitative and quantitative reasoning through probability theory, and I have until they're old enough to emancipate. At 18, they can say, I'm not going to learn this anymore. So that you can nudge my kids on the subject of why do we have to learn fractions? And we have to learn fractions so that we can learn math, so that we can do probability theory, so that we can learn what science is, so that we won't stand in line to get a vaccination that's dangerous and unneeded. That's what we're trying to do. I can nudge my kids on an example. Go, what's the lesson here? They go, there's no such thing as free shit. I go, that's right. There's no free shit. Somebody paid for it. Nothing's free. And if probability of A given B is not the probability of B given A, and we can start with the example of what's the probability that it's going to rain given that it's cloudy versus what's the probability that it's cloudy given that it's raining. A 10-year-old sees that difference. When that 10-year-old becomes an MD and they learn that a test has a 95% sensitivity, they think there's a 95% chance that you have the disease because you tested positive. And it's the same error. It's the exact same error. And by the way, when physicians were presented with discriminating between the sensitivity and the positive predictive value of a test, it's something like 95% failed, and
wow.
took a what would have been a 7.5% chance of recurrence and turned it into 75%. And just think of the cost for that, the implications for that, just in terms of medicine. The prosecutor's fallacy does the same thing. And what I'm going on and on about here is that there are failings in our reasoning that have produced a state at the university of primary research science and its publication and acceptance, null hypothesis significance testing, p-values, and peer review, that often without a hypothesis clearly stated, to which there's a null, because the first thing we see is the null in the probability of the data. But the failing that allows that to pass would find the earliest opportunity at correction, the perfect opportunity, at about 10 years old, at about the fourth grade. That is, that I can get into a fourth grader's head the difference between the probability of A given B and the probability of B given A with simple examples like the rain. And you can find derivative examples of that failing, like in the prosecutor's fallacy, where assuming innocence, the probability of the evidence would be low, and so therefore the probability of your innocence must be low, since the evidence is unusual. And people have had been released out of jail after sitting under that kind of faulty assumptions all around the world and in large numbers. There's famous cases of it. That Sally Clark, I think was her name, the gal that was accused of killing her two children because the odds of having two kids with SIDS deaths was astronomical. Therefore, she must have killed them.
That's right.
And the logic is absolutely flawed. The probability of A given B can be low, and the probability of B given A can be high. The probability of your data, given your hypothesis, assuming your hypothesis, might be really low, but it might be that the probability of the hypothesis is actually high on assumption of the data. And that is something that it's kind of hard, like the 95% of physicians get that's twisted. When you sit down and explain to an adult the difference, you'll have to do it again, and you'll have to do it again. You have to do it again. There are so many of these types of things that I, in my own learning recently, have had to reinforce repeatedly. And some of them seem counterintuitive. I have to stare at it until I see it that way. And what is profound to me is that we can remediate fourth grade education and put you on this path right away. One that is really important is the interpretations or underlying reality of probability. Probability isn't a physical property, and probability theory isn't an experimental science. It is the rational measure of our assumptions, of our knowledge, and that's a counterintuitive thing. I mean, Clayton Aubrey, the author of it, it's a neat read of a book, Bernoulli's Fallacy.
Okay.
He says he got into the field because a friend of his had left the PhD program in mathematics and went to work for a brewery and had a quality control and probability issue that he couldn't even explain with his just about to have a PhD in mathematics. And the reason is that the inference community wasn't willing to recognize the probability of a hypothesis, only probabilities of data. And he started looking into this, and he discovered the physicist E.T. Jaynes. And what kept him in a program he thought he was going to quit was that the probability theory that he was studying was some of the most counterintuitive material he'd ever seen in his life. When I read that, I knew exactly what was going on, because I too was was dealing with some of the counterintuitive nature of what I was learning. And I do fervently believe that there's comfortable mods that we can make in fourth grade education that are consistent with the ancient efforts and expectations at the trivium and the quadrivium. And when I was talking earlier, I think I can bridge qualitative and quantitative reasoning through probability theory and deliver a modern epistemology of philosophy of science and render this to perfection by the time the kids are able to escape.
So if you can,
if I do my job right,
yeah,
the issues for college are going to be maybe entirely vocational oriented. It might be you just go to get a skill or to get some kind of necessary credentialing, but it's not going to be hard to exceed uh, the walk away in homeschooled kids from anything they'd get at any university. Now, I wouldn't be able to get into the nuances of organic chemistry, and if that's your thing, then go there and study organic chemistry. But in terms of a general ed, kids that can read anything, write forcefully about it, and do some with some modicum of rhetorical flourish, right? With a little bit of style and flair and accuracy and good usage, and also not be terrified at using a partial differential equation to solve or do a Laplace transform to grind out answer to a physics problem. I don't think it's a crazy thing to move towards that for someone at 17, and yet very, very, very few people have those capacities as graduate students. And so whether they decided to do nothing with education, I tell you what, I'm going to be a landscape architect, this prep would be ideal. And if they decided they wanted to get into analytical jurisprudence and be a law professor at Bolt Hall in Berkeley, you'd also be, or study particle physics, you're going to be ideally prepared for this. And all of this for me is exactly consistent with what were the intents with the trivium and the quadrivium. And so I don't really care how old my math book is. It's fun, though, to look at stuff like the Ray arithmetic and realize that this is where Stephen Douglas and Oliver Wendell Holmes and Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt learned how to play with numbers, right?
Yeah.
Then you look at the 8th year book on it, and it reads like it reminds me of some of the finance material I had to wade through in order to tutor kids that were struggling in math in finance. And so I had this huge vocabulary problem. The math wasn't hard, the vocabulary was. And to think that this was something that several hundred million kids in 60 countries went through. What's cool too about the Ray arithmetic is that, I wish I had him up here, but the Ray's arithmetic, Ray was born in 1807, I believe it was, maybe 1804, and not 10 miles nor 7 years from where McGuffey was born, McGuffey's Reader. And the two of them had just a lock hold on primary education. You learn to read with McGuffey, and you learn to do math with Ray's. But for over 100 years, people learned arithmetic from those books in an era where we had high levels of numeracy compared to today. And McGuffey's gone, and we founded a Department of Education in 1978 where something like 80% of 8th graders were reading at 8th grade level. And now that figure's like 15% on the same exams.
Greg, you're so passionate about this. And earlier you said that you can't take on sugar and GMOs and vaccine because that would just kind of dull, your effect in each one. Why aren't you focusing on changing education at the 8-year-old, 10-year-old level if that's really what it's going to take to change things?
And maybe I am. I am. One of the things I have to be careful with is I didn't expect to enjoy teaching the kids the way I do. And it reminds me of the joy I got out of training. But I want to leave you with this. In the modern era where dad and mom both have jobs, and we entrust education to experts, and then you've got coaches for sports, and then you sit down on the floor and play Monopoly or Barbies with your kids to have quality time.
Yeah.
Teaching your kid how to add fractions with unlike denominators and to do so without tears, or, you know what I mean? Like maybe even find some humor in it, to play with it, and to teach a kid that skill is an unprecedented, unparalleled quality time. And that is because my father taught me a lot, and I hope he didn't have any fun, because I didn't. It wasn't an enjoyable experience. I'm grateful for it now, but enjoyable experience. And so I think I can overcome that. But I do want to speak to the inordinate joy I've gotten out of that. Riley was at the board the other day, and she's resisted a lot of the math. But it's funny that she kicks ass on knot tying and geometric constructions. And I said, this is just math without numbers. But she was standing at the board, and she says, she's just 11 years old. She goes, oh my God. I go, what? She goes, I get it. And I go, well, good. She goes, you know what's weird though? She goes, it's really simple.
That's great.
Finally, it's a victory. It's a victory.
But you've been passionate about kids and brain development and learning from the very first, CrossFit Kids. And, you and I traveled and watched some chess in St. Louis. And, at one time, the CrossFit Brain was what you were really focused on. And do you feel like maybe you should be doing more in that space? I mean, I shouldn't say that. You are doing a lot, but would you be having more effect focusing on that age group instead of, helping people who are already 100 pounds overweight as an adult?
I have social contact and warm relationships and friendships with an enormous amount of private school instruction.
Sure. Yeah.
The CEO of what's David Kirby's school? Forget. He was executive director of Cato though, and now he's got Acton Academy.
Acton Academy, yeah.
Acton Academy, and their CEO is a good friend of mine. I remember his name, the head of his business, but he's been out to some broken science stuff, and we're talking. And the CEO of the Great Hearts chain, CEO and co-founder, is a neighbor and friend, and he's been to several events. And Larry Arnn at Hillsdale is a friend, and I've been to his house for dinner and he to mine. And it's weird because I wasn't searching for these people, but I do have just a text away contact with an enormous amount of consumers of curriculum. And they all know that I think that we're in need of some remedy. And so, yeah, I'll remain excited about this. And I think that something is coalescing, seems inevitable. I've got my list of things that if you taught children, we wouldn't have scientists confused today. You mentioned in a discussion that the number of people that don't know what science is, the number of people that call themselves practicing scientists and can't stand there and tell you what science is. My father used to do what would almost look like a parlor trick, but he would take new hires in electrical engineering and physics, and these were PhD candidates and beyond that were brought into these meetings, and he would stand there and ask what science is, and take all comers, write it down on the board. And then he'd put astronomy and astrology up on the board. And he goes, okay, I'm going to take your definitions and I'm going to be an astrologer and tell you how I'm meeting your requirement. Until you realize that Aries make better lovers has no teeth in terms of number and quantification, but there's going to be a eclipse of the moon in 315 days, 9 hours, and 6 minutes. That's your differentiation. There's the critical point. And so if I look to, and I'm captivated by trivium and quadrivium, the ancient attempts and these curriculum, this approach to teaching grammar school has been constant for a long, long time. And it's easy to get back to that kind of stuff, but I do think that we could modernize that in that there have been some advances in probability theory and information theory and in mathematics. I'll take the simple example of mathematics. Music was thought by the ancients to be the way to teach number and change. Well, we've got a whole science of change called calculus. And the truth is, I can teach anybody calculus. In LA, when my grandmother, who's fairly long passed away, but I got her textbooks as a kid, and 11th year mathematics was differential calculus, and 12th year mathematics was integral calculus. And that was, and say, who took that? She goes, everyone. I go, everyone? She goes, well, one guy got killed on a motorcycle and another 2 girls got pregnant and they were thrown out of school, but everyone else did.
Wow.
That's what we did. That's what you taught kids.
Wow. Greg, I would really love here, and I would love to ask you, because you launched 30,000 brand new entrepreneurs. The thing that I think is probably holding a lot of gym owners back right now, CrossFit affiliates, is, I would say, lack of hope. What makes you optimistic about pursuing fitness, pursuing health, pursuing education, that maybe they could latch onto it just to kind of get them?
If I was system focused,
yeah,
I would be depressed. And my friends that think in terms of systems and organizations suffer emotionally from their lack of success. I had a friend that got a sabbatical from the prosecutor's office in Santa Cruz, and his wife was a highly regarded audiologist and was aghast at the prevalence with which hearing aid companies would knock on doors and low talk elderly people. So they had AARP lists, and they'd knock on the door and you'd answer, and they'd speak in inaudible tones and leave you with hearing aids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he took a year of his life, moved to Sacramento to make this an impossible practice. And at the end of the year, as the culmination in this work, this bill made the rotations from committee to committee to committee. The hearing aid companies were there to fix this thing. And what it did is it ingrained their practices. And at the end, he realized that the whole field had been made worse because of his efforts. That he,
oh my goodness,
put them in, and he actually suffered clinical depression from it. If I were trying to fix the USDA, if I were tasked as Jay Bhattacharya or RFK Jr. is, I would brace myself for an enormous amount of frustration and possibly depression. But what's cool is that when you're working with people, that's a whole different thing. And there's, some will, some won't, so what, right? But you quickly, we started with 12 people in the basement, I ended up with 150, and you never have any doubt for them. And they'll keep you more than busy. And maybe the thing we're trying to do, maybe the important thing is for that contagion, for the desire to be content and excited by the impact you have in your community. One of the MetFix affiliates had a gym population that had sounds from the telling of it that there was a lot of 30-something-year-olds, and now everyone's 60, 70, and 80. They still have games competitors, but they're super seniors now. And I understand all of that. Hey, if you really, as a trainer, I didn't want people coming in with perfect bodies in perfect health. But, if you don't see someone 500 pounds as a giant chunk of marble out of which you could maybe hammer out a David underneath, you're really not in the right business. And it was exactly like that for me. And so that girl, the nurse that was with the walker,
yeah.
Later I come in and she's knelt down on one foot. She's down on one knee and she's coochie-cooing a dog that's been tied to the bars, and then jumps up and, hey, how you doing this morning? And I remember when the proto behavior for that a year and a half earlier, that she would approach the 42-inch plyo, and with two strong and capable L1 superstars behind her, move the walker to the side, lean forward, and lift her paniss in pieces onto the box to lay down. Never really, not even having enough, so much material, it was hard to even get to horizontal, but there you are, collapsed on the box, and then work all that back to standing and back to the walker. And for me, I understand that transformation to be beyond my comprehension. You like no one. These people tell me they have a different favorite color. They like different kinds of clothes. They like, like bicycling because you can, right?
Yeah.
Imagine that. And, to be a docent for that journey is a remarkable thing. It's why people get into medicine. I mean, you go to work in an ER for the little girl that comes in that wasn't breathing and leaves 4 days later with balloons skipping, right? You look for that. And we have access to that where no one else can help. No one else can help. You're not going to do it, and it's hard to do 3 days a week, frankly. 1 day a week, unlikely. Unlikely. Once a month, not going to do it. Not going to do it. And tools. Do I need tongue depressors and a stethoscope and a reflex hammer? And do I need to look in your ears? No. I need to convince you to get off the carbs and move with me. I had an interesting thing, Chris. My friend Elliot's dad is an orthopedic surgeon, and he plays squash 3 days a week, and he rides his bike into university every day where he's a professor of orthopedic surgery. And the question is, what should he be doing to further protect his health? And I am not going to tell him double unders and thrusters. I don't believe that's true. I would hope I could interest him in improving the strength of his cycling, getting to work faster, and being more competitive in squash. Do I think that he's going to live longer because of that? I do not. I do not. I wish that were true. I wish it were true. I was dismayed at the breadth of adaptation from dietary changes alone where there is no exercise. And I had been training for a long time when I first got exposed to that. The very few trainers get to fix people's nutrition and not make a move. In 1995, I traveled with Barry Sears, and I got to talk to people about their nutrition that weren't going to move and didn't move. And frankly, it shocked me, and then in no small measure bummed me out that people were getting increased lean body mass and increased bone density without exercise by cutting carbs and eating more protein.
Yeah.
Wow. I couldn't find an adaptation that was unique to except getting calluses that you weren't going to get by control of your form. Yeah. And if that doesn't send a message loud and clear, so as an affiliate, I think that in this political climate, and I'm talking about the people we have at NIH and CDC and the runaway cost direct and attendant of chronic disease, I think that there's time to communicate truths about eating that can't be stopped by organizations funded by people that are selling shit to eat and drink. And we saw some of that directly. I mean, we defended some affiliates, and I believe in North Carolina and Florida over exactly this, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember what I'm talking? Do you remember this?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The Florida one for sure. That fight needs to continue to be fought, and it's probably more fightable now than ever before. Yeah, from a ground level, I think a lot of the storytelling is really what's probably most important, right? How do you affect that one person in your town instead of how do you change the legislation? But I think it was important also that CrossFit Inc. was fighting legislation, was willing to go to court for these things. And I'm really glad that you said, here's why, the fiduciary duty of private equity firm is going to stop that from happening.
I fully understand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't celebrate it, but I couldn't be in denial of it.
Right.
If I were tasked with making CrossFit highly profitable, I couldn't look you in the eye and tell you that means bring it back to what it was. Yeah. It was profitable, but not VC profitable. Now, there is this. Greg Glassman profitable was we can keep the lights on, pay the bills, enormous amount of discretionary income, and then exercise the discretion to spend it on things like building schools in Africa or, things like that. And but as soon as it's me promising you that I'm going to give you Q1, 2, 3, 4, Q5, 6, 7, 8 returns, that's going to look like going back to the fish oil pills that I denied. And that would make a fortune. It'd make a fortune. Here's something else that would happen though. I wouldn't be there. You mail me my shirt and you tell me that we now open at 9 a.m. and here's the approved haircuts, and I'm not going to be around. I would rather live in a wild west of John Wellborn's, both versions of John Wellborn, than something that formulated and regimented. Hey, what we did was the professionalization of the training space.
Right.
And that allows for both John Wellborns. I'm not going to tell you to be an effective math teacher what length of hair you need to have and what kind of shirt you need to wear, right? You could look like Jerry Garcia, or you could look like horn rim glasses with crew cut. All of that happens. All of that happens. You see it in medicine. You see people, they're brilliant minds in medicine that you could give, well, really, this guy? Okay. That's all good. That's all good. And business doesn't like to work that way.
Right.
There's also there was a hit on in deliberate and quick elimination of people closest to me. The company took an intellectual hit that's going to be a long time coming. I don't know that they didn't reduce the standard deviation, reduce the IQ of the employees by a full standard deviation. Not that there aren't brilliant people still in its employ, but there were a handful of highly intelligent people that they needed to go first.
Yeah, I think there's that. I don't know. I don't want to call it lack of science at the top now, but something like that, but also lack of inspiration. And that's why I was asking you, why should affiliates be hopeful? And I think you nailed that. You find the hope in the person that's right in front of you and the change that you're affecting in their life, not what HQ is selling for this month.
Yeah. And I think it's always been that way. Mm-hmm. This, again, for me, my introspection is, hey, we got a relevancy problem. We have a relevancy problem. Why is it? It's because Chris unlocks the door in the morning and 99.999% of what can be gotten, he's getting. We need to do things for Chris he can't do for himself.
Got it.
That's what we got to do. And boy, that meant we had to be sharper than we were. We had to be more resourceful than we were. We needed to bring the smartest people we could find around. The parade of what I called mesperts, expert on the mess, is one of the proudest things I've ever done. And guess what? I mean, we've got Karen Thompson, which is where I got the mesperts. I don't know if you know the connection to Karen and all of them, but we've got a nephrologist who's worried about blood pressure and impact on the kidneys, and then I've got the the cardiologist has different concerns than the pulmonologist, and there were different mechanisms that were under consideration. But when Karin said that sugar is addictive, they all would shift gears and go, yeah, it probably is. Everybody. And so she was what was so common to so many from so many different walks of life. They all gave her quarter. And I don't think you'd be surprised to know we're in communication with all those people, except for the two that have died, Sarah Hallberg and Paul Roach. But the rest are friends. And it's also fascinating to me that none of us, we were friends before COVID, and we have the exact same take on it. And yet before that, our interests were metabolic. They were,
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, in terms of that public health, we're all seeing the same thing. The only one of the experts that got vaccinated was Malcolm Kendrick, and he couldn't go to his ski chalet in Grenoble, France, and he'd rather have COVID and die than. So he was going to take any risk possible to, and I hope he faked it somehow. But he was self-professed vaccinated because of the travel restriction. Everyone else, no one wanted anything to do with that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
What would unite us? You learn the voice of public health on one issue, and you get it on other issues. It's actually a skill you can develop. For instance, when I put in cancer and sugar into Google and see organization after organization after organization committed to dispelling the dangerous myth that sugar causes cancer. And what would the dangers of that myth be?
Yeah, exactly. There's not much down. Yeah, we all stop eating it, I guess.
Yeah. We're also seeing this, Chris, not to beat a dead horse, but you can find, maybe excess dietary sugar causes obesity. And yeah, there's probably some mechanisms in obesity that are causing cancer. But sugar doesn't cause cancer. And man, we know this play. And it was that sugar doesn't cause diabetes was the big diabetes myth published as a diabetes myth by the CDC. And on closer examination, you find that sugar causes inflammation, and inflammation causes diabetes in people with a genetic defect. Thank you for that elucidation.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet they don't hesitate. If you do have diabetes, you can't eat any of these things.
That's right.
Yeah. I read the same Axel Pfluger, and I told him that the CDC says that it's a myth that sugar causes diabetes. And he brings me this published piece he got online. And it's if you have diabetes, you can't eat sweets, confectionaries, desserts. You got every kind of different way of saying sugar there.
Yeah.
He goes, it doesn't say that it's a myth. And you know what he doesn't see? The inset around which this text he's reading is wrapped. Number one diabetes myth, sugar causes. He didn't see the inset. He's going to get the details, right?
Yeah.
They give both messages on one sheet of paper.
As you said, if you can reverse it, you can prevent it. And so it is interesting that people with type 2 diabetes are told stay away from sweets, don't elevate your blood sugar, et cetera. But also they're told sugar doesn't cause it.
The EADS tell of talking to patients and saying, yep, you're gonna cut all the sugar out of your diet, you're gonna reduce your carbohydrate intake dramatically. And by the way, the psoriasis patches on your knees and elbows are going to go away too. And if not immediately, they'll respond to treatment where they didn't before. And they were asked why, and we have no idea. That's what we're seeing, right? Mm-hmm. That's the clinical reality. You can't logically or safely discount the potency of clinical reality.
You said earlier, that's where it all starts.
That's where it starts. If you're not empirical, you shouldn't even pretend to be scientific. And you need to look at every theory that doesn't pan out with what you see. You got to look closer. Question what you're seeing. Look again. Look at the theory more closely. And then at some point, it's okay to say, I don't think this is right. I don't think it's right. I remember the girl at Gold's Gym that told me it's the carbs, it's not the fat. Vicky Sims was her name. And she told me, go get the Atkins book. Atkins. She's Atkins. So I went to Pickwick Bookstore and bought Dr. Atkins' Diet Revolution. And it made sense, but the reason I had the discussion with her is her clients changed faster than mine.
Mm-hmm.
Then you find you can do it. And you're like, and then you can chase studies. I did that for 15, 20 years. And what am I chasing studies? It looks like this. Am I estimating the science? No, I know there's a guy named Norman Kaplan who writes the Deadly Quartet in July of '89 in the Archives of Internal Medicine. And what he says is that hyperinsulinism is central and causal to hypertriglyceridemia, upper body obesity, and glucose intolerance, and whatever the fourth one is. And in the body of the article, he says that the relationship is confusing if you look at it temporally, but the mechanisms are clear, and that this thing is causal of the others. And how do I know it's good science? Because I cut your blood sugar and all those things happen.
Right.
That's what I do for a living. That's what I do for a living. And so as I watch you get stronger and smaller, I know when they test your triglycerides, the number's down. Just know that's how you do that. That's how you drive one of those. And is more research going to fix this? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But it doesn't affect the fun or the satisfaction and purpose out of communicating that and getting someone to try it.
Yeah. And also, I think the opportunity of being a coach and being the only one who can probably make that change in somebody's life.
Yeah, there are, there's a lot of next door neighbors that just, you've seen it. There's someone that's dragging people into your gym, and a lot of them.
Yeah.
Philippe Kahn made it an employment requirement to come to CrossFit. And to be on his sailing team or to work with his startup, you had to CrossFit.
Wow. And
he was pretty much a prick about it. And it was for some of the people just like, I resent the hell out of this,
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, we'll go easy, right? And others had an explosive thing. Bruce Edwards, who's worked as our COO, brought me client after client after client. And you can build with most practices, I believe, I'm of the view that whether it's an accounting practice or a legal practice, if you stop to make a family tree of reference, you find that there's someone that maybe brought someone who brought someone that brought a bunch, but you can build family tree out of this, and there are people that are just fantastic about giving the word. How many times have we heard this? I'm friends with Bruce and he won't shut up about it. Or my nephew just won't stop talking about CrossFit and has nagged me until I've come in here, right?
Yeah.
I bank on that. That was my marketing.
Yeah.
I didn't do any marketing. What I did is I took such good care of you that you wouldn't shut up, and became annoying to the point of people were coming in marginally against their will.
Yeah.
And what do I have to do? I have but one purpose, and that's to get you to come back. And so I want to give you an exposure that doesn't debilitate, that you leave going, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was hard, and I'm actually impressed with how well I did. And if you can't get that rhythm out of it, you got nothing.
I think that's really critical for people to understand. So I'm glad that you really said that too, because a lot of us, we tried to find the hardest CrossFit workout that we could when we started, and, threw up, tore our hands, bragged about it, and then didn't understand that that's not what most people want.
Yes.
So,
Chris, I've got to make an assessment as to how badly you want it and if you would have any desire at all for what it is that I would desire for you looking at you. But I want to make an assessment of that. And then what I have to do is have expectation just at the moment slightly beyond yours. And so that I've got you going, okay, I'll do that, but I'll give you 5, but not 6. And yeah, I'll do 15 pounds, but not 20. And you have to know when to pull up too. I had a client that for years I was telling other people that if she gets a dewy perspiration going, I'm blowing it. That it's right after that she self-reports of misery.
oh,
And it took a while to get to where like it's okay to have that high heart rate and to be sweaty. Funny thing. But I had the problem with Annie Sakamoto. I wanted more for her than she wanted for herself. That created a friction in our relationship.
that's a real learning curve. Is when you see somebody's potential, but it's also quite a ways from where they are right now. Because as an experienced coach, you see every step to get there, and they can't see that. You have to sort of rein it in and say, I think you could do this. And I think that the most memorable clients for a lot of us are the ones who eventually just kind of exceeded themselves and did something that they never thought that they could.
Yeah, we all remember the moment that Sally climbed the rope and started crying, sliding down the rope, everyone yelling, don't slide, but she's crying so hard she slides down the rope and just never did. The first time she came to us, she looked up there and couldn't imagine that she would ever, at 65 years old, be able to get up the rope.
Yeah.
There's no one so hard as to not be impressed by that. Yeah.
Well, Greg, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us, but also everything that you've given us for the last couple of decades, and your willingness always to jump on these and chat and share and be so transparent.
Thank you, and let me finish with you. And thank you for the kind words and the support you've always given me. And you've been a general in the field, but when the focus changed from the games to health, I knew that not everyone was going to make the journey. I knew that people in games media didn't give a flying fuck about hypertension or chronic disease. And I understand that. I didn't expect them to. And being transitioned away from CrossFit, what a nice euphemism for that, but transitioning away from that and where it's currently going, I see the MetFix as just another continuation. And I've told Emily, if CrossFit's doing it, we shouldn't be. And if it's at that core competency of teaching movement, we're not going to improve on that.
Right.
And so my hope would be that anyone who wants to change someone's health would kind of wise up to the underlying realities of metabolic system. And if you're going to be talking about movement, it would be ridiculous not to follow the L1 program and to go to those people and find out what's going on there. But I know that this new nutrition program isn't going to be opening both barrels on sugar.
What is the new nutrition program that you mean through CrossFit?
I keep hearing that they're just about to unroll a new nutrition program.
Oh, I honestly haven't heard that.
And it's a hard thing to do. That's a tough thing to do. It's a bold thing. You can still get your YouTube videos pulled down pretty quickly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I mean, I really do hope for the best. And I de-affiliated when you left. I came back when Dave Castro asked me to and gave it a year like he asked, and then, de-affiliated again. But, I'm optimistic. I still think the L1 is probably the best course out there in the field. And, we'll still send people to it too. So I'm glad that MetFix is a continuation of that.
Any evolution is possible, and I could even see it at some point. It's just a training certification organization, and the affiliate program starts to look like something else.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I know this. As an affiliate, I am so impressed with the way so many of them did so much that it was terrifying. That I was at Whistler truly in front of a group of peers.
Yeah.
That though I may have been their source for it, they got it now. And again, that search for relevancy was profound. I don't feel that I'm on a different course from that. And maybe it's not tied to even a business, but I think as a functioning member of society, I think I find relevancy in providing tools to see bullshit where there's bullshit. You know, it was, I know we're done, but I wanted to,
okay.
It was, John Smith at Oxford that said the primary purpose, if not the sole purpose of an education, was for a man to detect when another man's talking rot. And this was at Oxford, an incoming class in 1912.
Amazing.
The primary purpose, if not the sole purpose of an education, was to detect when a man's talking rot. And I don't think he was trying to be funny. And I believe that myself. I do believe that is. And so that's kind of what I'm doing with the kids in the homeschooling. I mean it quite literally. We're going to learn fractions so that we can do math, do probability, learn science, and not stand in line for unneeded vaccines. Thank you, Chris. I love you, brother.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks for listening to Run a Profitable Gym. For more support, join a community of 10,000 gym owners by visiting gymownersunited.com.